Hello and welcome to episode 96 of Glitch Report. My name is GnittWitt. Thank you so much for stopping by, saying hi, kicking it with me today on the stream of dreams, the show of shows, and everything in between. You can find everything that I do over at my Linktree, linktree.com/GnittWitt, GnittWitt, Twitch, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky, Instagram Threads. I pronounce Instagram Threads like it has a Z at the end, but it doesn't. But what if it did? What a time. Remember when we were just replacing S's with Z's and Z's depending on what part of the world you were in? Remember that? What a time to be alive that was. I don't think that's as cool as replacing C's with K's. I mean, listen, it worked great for Mortal Kombat. Could you imagine if Mortal Kombat was spelt with a C instead of a K? It wouldn't last. It wouldn't last. Doesn't matter how much violence there was, how many rib cages exploded when doing fatalities. It doesn't matter if you could rip out a demon man's beating heart and shove it down his throat and then chop his head off, or whatever you do in Mortal Kombat. That's probably a fatality now that I think about it. But yeah, imagine if that game was spelled with the C instead of a K. Psh, get out of here. And get out of here indeed. This is 96. We are creeping ever so slowly. Well, actually, it's not slow. It's a weekly podcast. If it was slow, it would be like every other week or every month or whatever. But we are creeping up to the big 100. And there was this part of me that thought to myself, what if I stopped numbering these after 100? Like, how many podcasts in general? And forget how successful one podcast is or another. Like, I'm a small town, small bean in the grand scheme of things. I appreciate the support, but listen, we are still in very, very humble beginnings in terms of the audience for this podcast. That's fine. That's neither here nor there. But I thought to myself, what if I stopped numbering these after we hit 100, right? But then I started thinking, like, there are so many things that are still numbered in this day and age. You think about numbering for phones. They didn't stop numbering phones, which is fine. People are totally cool with the idea of, like, it's just new number whenever phones come out, and that's cool. And also Final Fantasy. I mean, granted, there have been other spin-offs of Final Fantasy and whatnot, but damn, dude, we're up to like 16 at least. They have made at least 16 Final Fantasies. And for that, I applaud them for continuing to put a number on that game. I can only imagine, for people who don't know a damn thing about Final Fantasy, don't know anything about how, almost each game or almost every game is a unique universe setting, characters, all that stuff. I have to imagine that you look into it and being like, oh, do I have to start from 1 to play 16? Like, if I want to play as, what was his name? Clive? Who's the guy in 16? Clive? Yeah. I can imagine that being a little confusing. But, for a podcast, no one needs to start at 1. It's almost like I've equated, like, getting into podcasts, before we get to the actual meat of the show, I've equated podcasts the same as, like, getting into something like pro wrestling. Yes, there are, big pay-per-view events that kind of act as both, season finales and also kind of season starters for some part of that wrestling show, in terms of, we're going to see feuds ending on this show, we're going to move on to something else, or this is just the start, or we're kind of in the middle of a story or something like that. An example being like kind of the Hook and Chris Jericho story going into AEW's Double or Nothing pay-per-view, which was the most recent pay-per-view. Like, that story's not over, right? That story is kind of in the middle, so to speak. For better or for worse. I'm not here to talk about Chris Jericho. I would hope to avoid it as much as possible, but you know what I'm saying, right? So in some cases, you would look at it and be like, well, shouldn't I go watch the pay-per-view? And be like, no, don't watch the pay-per-view. Watch whatever the most recent episode of TV was and just never stop watching. just never get off. Once you get on the train, don't get off. Just keep your arms and legs inside the train at all times, whether that be podcasting, whether that be wrestling, and I would even say like gaming as well. Like I know people have this kind of thought that, oh, I should go back and I should play the classics. I should go back and kind of brush up on my gaming history, and that's fine. You can do that if you'd like, but I would say look at the games that are available on the systems and platforms that you're looking to play them on, and just start playing. If that ends up being a 5-year-old game, if that ends up being a 5-month-old game, more power to you either way. But I just feel like, we often think about, and I think the Marvel Cinematic Universe has kind of done this to people where it's like, how am I supposed to know what Iron Man 3 is about if I didn't watch Thor 2 and all that stuff? And it's just like, don't worry about it. Really, we have overthought things like canon. We've overthought things like story. And I think a lot of storytellers, and if you think about podcasting and wrestling and things like that as a form of storytelling, I think storytelling in general has overthought the idea that like all of this stuff needs to be interconnected and referenced and set up and, foreshadowed and all that stuff. And like, yes, those are all basic elements of storytelling, but at the end of the day, why don't you just craft a story that has something of a beginning, middle, and end that either keeps people, leaves people wanting more in a positive way, that they don't feel cheated in the experience that they had, and then work to craft another story next time around that does the same thing, if not better, and just repeat that cycle. It doesn't need to be like like Avril Lavigne. Why you got to make it so complicated? So that's my rambling to start the show. Coming up on the show today, we got a lot of news, but honestly, I've been playing a ton of games. I did not plan. Well, I did plan to some extent to do this, but I got 4 games that I have been kind of working on simultaneously throughout this week. I did have a ton of gaming yesterday. That was on Wednesday. Just trying to catch up on some games that I was like, oh shoot, if I don't play this now, I'm not going to be able to talk about it on the podcast, so on and so forth. So coming up on the show today, we're going to talk games that I've been playing. Ghost of Tsushima, Hellblade 2, Senua's Saga. Sorry, it is Senua's Saga, Hellblade 2. Listen, for the rest of this podcast, we're just going to call it Hellblade 2, okay? Ghost of Tsushima, Hellblade 2, XDefiant, and Multiversus. Those are all games that I have been playing. We're going to talk about that towards the end of the show. Plus, we have an updated schedule for Summer Game Fest. All of the gaming conferences, dates and times. We're going to cover that. Sony announced a state of play, though I'm going to leave that news towards the end, and you'll find out why in a moment. But we're going to kick things off with some Sony news. If you remember that Neil Druckmann interview from last week, what an absolute disaster of an interview. Just, and I'm not picking on him. I think we're going to find out in just a moment who is to blame for how bad that interview turned out, because Sony has apologized to Neil Druckmann himself following, quote, a heavily edited interview. This is a article that I'm getting from Jordan Midler, working over at Video Games Chronicles. As always, shout out to Video Games Chronicles. Druckmann has gone on to post an unedited version of that interview on social media following backlash. And just spoilers, it's so bad. It was such a bad interview that Sony has since removed the interview. They've gotten rid of it. It's so phony baloney. It is such bullshit that they have removed it. So I just want to say, while I'm not here to necessarily apologize for ripping into Neil Druckmann the way I might have in the discussion of the news story last week, it is a good thing that Sony has addressed those concerns, because it seems like they really fucked him over. They really dropped the ball on one of the biggest creative leads in the Sony enterprise when it comes to kind of leading PlayStation developers. Last week, Sony published an interview with the Naughty Dog designer on its website, in which he was quoted as saying that his next title could, quote, redefine mainstream perception of gaming. However, Druckmann took to social media to claim he never made such comments and published what he claimed to be his unredacted words in full, suggesting that Sony's version was heavily edited to the point where context was lost. Let me see if I can pull that up on twitter.com. Okay. 1 second here. We're getting a little ahead of ourselves. He says, in editing my rambling answers in my recent interview with Sony, some of my words, context, and intent were unfortunately lost, Druckmann wrote before providing a full transcript of his answer. A message on the Sony Group portal now reads, in reviewing our recent interview with Naughty Dog's Neil Druckmann, we have found several significant errors and inaccuracies that don't represent his perspective and values, including topics such as animation, writing, technology, AI, and future projects. We apologize to Neil for misrepresenting his words and for any negative impact this interview might have caused him and his team in coordination with Naughty Dog and Sony Interactive Entertainment. We have removed the interview. Which I think just goes to show, like, how much of it could have possibly been true. There was a great, I don't usually say this about anything on Twitter, but there was a great Stephen Totillo post on Twitter showing the differences between what was originally said and what was edited as part of, let me see if I can find it. Oh, I should have done more prepping for this. Let's see if we can find it. Yes. Okay. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to read you one more time, just for context, What I'm going to do is read you Neil Druckmann's actual answer. Okay. Then I'm going to read you the words that were not in the original. Let's go ahead and do that. Well, I've been very lucky in that I've already had that. I got the chance to make several of my dream projects. I'm working on a new game right now, and it's maybe the most excited I've been for a project yet. I want you to know, just before I get ahead of myself, some of these words were retained in the original. This is kind of a visual thing, so if you go look it up, but anyways. It's maybe the most excited I've been for a project yet. I can't talk about it or our bosses will get very mad at me. I guess in general, there is something happening now that I think is very cool, which is there's a new appreciation for gaming that I've never seen before. Like when I was growing up, gaming was more of a kid's thing. Now it's clearly for everyone, but it's like, if you're a gamer, you know about the potential of games, and non-gamers, they don't really know what they're missing out on. But my hope was when we made The Last of Us as a TV show that we would change that, and why I became so involved with it. I wanted so badly for it to be good because I wanted this to happen, which is like someone who will watch the show and really like it, and fall in love with those characters the way we have fallen in love with those characters and their story. And then realize at the end, that's based on a game, and then go and check out the game and just see the wealth of narratives and everything that's happening in games. So now I feel like it's kind of a spotlight on gaming. And Fallout just came out, and that's a big success for Amazon, and I think that's really exciting. Not because games need to be movies or need to be TV shows, but I think it just kind of opens the eyes of a bunch of people that weren't aware of the kind of experiences that exist in games. I think right now we've hit a tipping point where it's about to take off, where people realize, oh my God, there's all these incredible moving experiences in games. So I'm not only excited for this for this game that we're making, and it's something really fresh for us, but I'm also excited to see how the world reacts to it, because The Last of Us and the success of the show, people even outside of gaming are looking at us to see what it is that we put out next. I'm very excited to see what the reaction for this thing will be, and I've already said too much about it. I'll stop there. So you're asking me for my dream project. I've been very lucky to have worked on my favorite games and with incredible collaborators, and I'm very thankful for them. At no point in that actual answer does he say that the next game could redefine mainstream perception of gaming. That was like the big takeaway from that original kind of interview, right? That he said that the next project could redefine mainstream perceptions of gaming. Now, let's look at his edited answer. I've been lucky to work on several dream projects, and I'm currently excited about a new one, which is perhaps the most thrilling yet. There's a growing perception for gaming that transcends all age groups, unlike when I was growing up. This shift is highlighted by our venture into television with The Last of Us, which I hope would bridge the gap between gamers and non-gamers. The show's success has spotlighted gaming, illustrating the rich, immersive experience it offers. This visibility excites me not only for our current project, but for the broader potential of gaming to captivate a global audience. I'm eager to see how this new game resonates, especially following the success of The Last of Us, as it could redefine mainstream perceptions of gaming. I just can't fucking believe what I just read. I cannot. Sorry if I tripped over my words reading it. There was a lot to read in that first one. I cannot fucking believe what I just read. Like, look at how they massacred my boy, Neil Druckmann. Like, that edited answer does not sound like it came from a human being. Like, at all. Who the fuck talks about transcending all age groups in anything? Not human beings, I'll tell you that right now. Holy shit. No one talks about venturing into television. No one does that. No human being wants to talk about the broader potential of gaming to captivate a global audience. Like, they did him so dirty. They did him so dirty. And this is the parent company that he works for. Man, listen, I was critical of what Neil Druckmann had to say last week, but man, I can't believe the type of the sprinkling of bullshit that Sony listen, I don't know who's to blame. Like, I don't know if there was I don't know I don't know who to blame in this scenario. I don't know if there is one person you can blame. But if there's one person you can't blame, it's Neil Druckmann. Here I am, part of the Druckmann Defense Force. All of a sudden, we're like D tier Avengers. But man, I'm floored reading those two responses, his original answer and the edited answer. Like, they added whole sentences. Like, literally entire sentences to that edited version. And for what? Like, so here's what you need to know is that in a world where less and less people trust traditional news outlets, less and less people trust the mainstream media and journalists are, the credibility of journalists is at an all-time low, whether that be because of, being attacked by, politicians or whoever that be, the ownership class, the big companies, the CEOs, whatever. In a world where that traditional source of news, those traditional news sources, have been beaten, battered, broken, and robbed of any credibility, be it their faults of their own or otherwise. This is actually the world that you end up living in, is this highly manipulated and mutated aspect of the truth, and in this case, people's literal words. by the people that work for the company that put out the statement. And I'm not sitting here saying I'm doing the Lord's work or anything like that. I mean, Neil Druckmann's the one who went out there and had to clear the air, right? And thank God he was able to clear the air without getting, thrown out by Sony for saying, hey, you got to stick to the script, man. You got to, whatever the case may be. Going back to the old idea of wrestling for that extent of, hey, we wrote you this promo. You're going to go out there and you're going to say it. You're going to cut a promo in a gas mask and tell the audience how much they stink so that you need to wear a gas mask. I feel for him. I feel for Neil Druckmann, because that's some bullshit right there. And I don't know what else to say other than just, keep that in mind. Like when you hear these news stories, whether it's gaming, anything like that, just remember that we live in a world where a lot of the traditional mainstream media, news sources, news outlets have lost all of their teeth, all of their credibility. And this is probably the news that you are receiving more often than not as a result. Let's move on from that to some Xbox news. Xbox, this is a report. I don't often do reports in the sense that if no statement has officially been made, if no press release has dropped, I don't necessarily feel the need to cover it, but I think there's some credibility to this. Xbox has reportedly signed the first game from the Rocksteady co-founders' new studio, which is 100 Star Games. Now, stop me if you've heard this one before. People that made a very prominent, very popular single-player action-adventure game are back at it again, this time to make a single-player action-adventure game. Sounds crazy. London-based 100 Star Games, working on a AAA single-player action-adventure game powered by the Unreal Engine 5, and Microsoft is said to be financing the project, which can be something that you could expect to be on Xbox consoles and PC, Game Pass, all that stuff. Though as of right now, nothing has been announced at the moment. They're creating a small team of only 100 industry veterans and emerging talents to work on the project. The last time the co-founders of Rocksteady had put out a game, that was Batman Arkham Knight, I believe. And then they left in 2022. So I guess they probably worked on some amount of I totally forgot the name of the game. Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. I almost forgot about Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. Never want to forget about that. But it was just a real quick news story as we continue on. The folks that made Batman Arkham Asylum, or the folks that founded the studio that made Batman Arkham Asylum, have now founded a new studio, which we've already talked about in the past, and are reportedly working with Xbox. Now, this is an interesting news story because I can actually point to at least one other developer who has approached development like this in recent years. CD Projekt, those are the Witcher and the Cyberpunk 2077 people, say that they want to release more major games more frequently. There was about a 5-year gap between The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt and Cyberpunk 2077. Now, when you think about it for a moment, I know that most of us aren't looking at game developer schedules and calendars and release dates, but a 5-year gap between something like The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt and Cyberpunk 2077 isn't actually that crazy. It's actually kind of in the norm for where we're at with how long AAA game development takes. However, you can't speed up the process in which you make these games, because if you do that, you end up with the initial release of Cyberpunk 2077, where it literally took them a year and more to make that game the game that it probably should have been at launch. I'm not saying it was perfect, but they got there eventually. Right? So even if you say Cyberpunk could have been in the oven for another 2 years, that is a potential 7-year gap then between the release of The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt and Cyberpunk 2077. And 7 years is on the higher end of the normal, kind of release for, the cadence of AAA development releases for games. Like, it's not that crazy. It's really, really not. However, one of the things that these developers have been trying to do is have multiple games in a state of pre-production. The idea is that, like, we have, the main game that most of the people are working on, and then we have like a medium-sized project that people are ramping up for. We have maybe one or two other smaller games that are very, very early that we have a skunk works, a small team of people working on, and that we can just cycle people off and on as we go, right? During the CD Projekt's quarterly earnings call on Tuesday, the company was asked whether it has the bandwidth to focus on more than one large game simultaneously, with the goal of making its release schedule less lumpy. Quote, "We already worked on two projects at the same time when we worked on Cyberpunk 2077's DLC Phantom Liberty, because that was a game-sized project with almost 300 people working on it. And at the same time, we've already been working on Polaris, so we've had an experience of working on more than one project," said the CEO. "And we're working on more than one project at this time. There is Cyberpunk 2 being developed in Boston. There is Polaris being developed predominantly here in Europe. And obviously we have other projects with other teams like Project Sirius, also in Boston, with the Molasses Flood. And there is the Witcher 1 remake being done in cooperation with Canis Majoris, so you can definitely expect us to release more titles, and the cadence of launches is something we definitely plan to increase. Although I will obviously not comment on what is the space between the projects time-wise, because obviously if you're like, hey, we got a new game out every year, or a new game out every 2 years, that, unless you're Call of Duty or you make a sports game, or you're Ubisoft making Assassin's Creed games, I'm starting to realize there are more games that are typically out every year than we think about, regardless of how long that team had or the size of the team that was working on it. How much time the team had to work on it. You can't just go out there and say, hey, every 18 months. But there was a time, and this is going to sound crazy, but during the PS3 era, if we go to I'm going to pick on Naughty Dog for a moment, because we were talking about them earlier. There was a time, especially during the PS3 era, where sequels to games were coming out fast and furious. I'm not joking. Uncharted 1 came out in 2007. Uncharted 2 came out in 2009. Uncharted 3 came out in 2011. The Last of Us came out in 2013. So that's damn near every other year. Then it takes them 3 years between the after The Last of Us to put out Uncharted 4 in 2016. Then they did Uncharted The Lost Legacy in 2017, and then The Last of Us Part 2 in 2020. A pretty quick turnaround of things, at least in that PS3 era, right? Another great example would be BioWare. BioWare was cranking out games in the PS3 era, and I'm going to get to the point of all this in just a moment, I promise. But let's do this. Mass Effect from BioWare, 2007. Dragon Age Origins from BioWare, 2009. Mass Effect 2, 2010. That is a year between Dragon Age Origins and Mass Effect 2. And then another year after Mass Effect 2, Dragon Age 2, 2011. Mass Effect 3, 2012, right? You can see this like cadence of, we have multiple developers, because it's the only way you can do it. Multiple developers working on multiple projects, ramping things up as the game is closer to release, and then slowly building up the team for the next game, constantly rotating people in and out of projects. And I mentioned at the start of the show, hey, there's another developer who has been regularly putting out updates stating where their multiple projects are in development, and that is the good folks who made Alan Wake 2, right? Remedy have been constantly keeping people in the loop of like, hey, we're scaling up our next big project is the Control multiplayer game. We're going to scale that up. We are currently in pre-production or preparing for, you know, the big stage production of something like Max Payne 1 and 2 remakes and stuff like that. Like, they've been constantly rotating people in and out of these projects. And I know that, like, just sounds so obvious, but like, that literally used to be how the game the game industry worked to a large extent. Those are just a couple of studios that I mentioned, Naughty Dog and BioWare and stuff like that. And obviously not every person from BioWare touches Mass Effect 2 the same way, you know, the same people touch Dragon Age 2 and so on and so forth on the PS3 era. But that's how this stuff worked. That's how you could get, you know, 3 Uncharted games on a PlayStation 3 in that era. Was you had just multiple teams working on it, you know, over that period of time, scaling up and scaling down as support ended, working on, you know, new titles, you know, 2 years before the main game was out. And I don't know if this is going to be kind of a return to form for the game industry, because at the end of the day, these big games have only gotten bigger. The remake of The Witcher 1 is going to be far more complicated. I'd have to guess. I don't know how games work, but I'm just spitballing here. I'd have to imagine that the remake of The Witcher 1 with the current technology of the day is going to be far more complicated than the original Witcher was, and probably more complicated than The Witcher 3 was. So, you know, kind of keep that in mind in terms of, oh, does that mean we're going to see more big AAA games being released, or, you know, whatever the size and scale of these games are that we want to refer to them as? I don't necessarily think that is the case. I think you just might see more people working on more projects more consistently versus a scenario where it's like, I literally only worked on one game for 7 years and I want to die, whatever the case may be. So yeah, this is, so we'll wrap this up with this kind of interesting little tidbit here. As of last month, 407 developers were working on Polaris, which is the first entry in a new Witcher trilogy. At the time of its announcement in 2022, CD Projekt said it intended to publish all 3 games in a 6-year period. Hey, what is 6 divided by 3? You tell me what 6 divided by 3 really makes you think, right? So the idea is that you have 407 developers that are working on Polaris, which is part of the new Witcher trilogy. You have 56 employees are currently working on the Cyberpunk sequel, which is codenamed Orion. You have 39 developers working on the Witcher spin-off project Sirius. 20 people are working on CD Projekt's first original IP, which is codenamed Hadar. And then you have 13 people that are currently engaged on other projects. And guess what? Once the next Witcher trilogy game, the first Witcher trilogy game comes out, then I bet 407 of those people are going to move on to the Cyberpunk sequel, right? Bam, we just put out The Witcher 4, right? Bam, we're going to keep people busy working on Cyberpunk 2, right? And then, hey, maybe we're going to keep, we're going to add some people from that Witcher trilogy who were the new Witcher trilogy who are familiar with The Witcher to work on the Witcher spinoff, whatever the case may be. Like, this is how games have worked in the past to some extent, or at least I feel like they've worked in the past to some extent, especially during that 360 era. So I'm curious to see how this works for, medium to bigger-ish companies like CD Projekt and like Remedy. Amazon is out there making games. I don't know if you know this, but they are. And now Amazon has partnered up with the former Forza Horizon developers to make a open world driving game. Currently, the game is untitled. Plans are to release it on PC, PlayStation 5, and Xbox Series X and S. I have pounded my chest. I will shout it from the rooftops. There is no better open world driving game than Forza Horizon. There's nothing. There's not even close. Take The Crew, make it unplayable because you can't play it offline. throw that game in the fucking trash or the recycling bin if you are environmentally friendly. Take the Lego 2K driving game and put that in the shredder. Flush it down the toilet. None of those games can hold a candle to Forza Horizon, in my humble opinion. It's one of the games that I would love to see Microsoft release on PlayStation. I think folks who play PlayStation games deserve a good open world driving experience, and there is none better than Forza Horizon. So I'm very excited about the idea of Maverick Games, the former Forza Horizon some of the former Forza Horizon developers, to be working on a game with Amazon and doing what they have kind of done best for a long time, which is open world driving games. Now, for those wondering, the folks that are still at Playground Games, the developers of Forza Horizon, they're kind of working on potentially 2 projects at that time. So they are currently working on Fable, which is the open world fantasy RPG from, I'm assuming it's open world, the long running fantasy RPG series from Microsoft, but I'm assuming that those folks are probably also working on a Forza Horizon 6. And I would, if I was Microsoft, I would also be working on a Forza Horizon 6. I know that there's, the Forza formula has maybe gotten a little long in the tooth. It's gotten a little samey over the past few years. But if I was Microsoft, I would look at the success of Forza Motorsport. I would look at the I would look at the success of Forza Horizon. I would look at the not so successful release of Forza Motorsport. And I would realize, shit, people want fun and good racing video games on our consoles. Let's continue to make good ones and forget that Forza Motorsport ever happened. Which is harsh. I know that they're continuing to put out updates for Forza Motorsport, but that game dropped the ball in a lot of different ways. So I'm very excited to see what Maverick Games is working on, how that shapes up for them. Currently have 62 people on the team, and the studio plans to hire more. This was a really quick one. By the time you're hearing this, it will have already happened unless you're watching the podcast live. But the PlayStation State of Play has been announced for today, Thursday, happening at 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. It's going to be a half an hour show, a shorty, and they're going to be showing off 14 titles. That's going to be on YouTube, Twitch, TikTok, all that good stuff. The show is set to include updates on PS5 and PSVR 2 titles, plus a look at a PlayStation Studios game arriving later this year. This is also, I mentioned this, I was texting somebody today about this. If I was a betting man, and I'm not really a betting man, but if I was, I would also bet that this is where they announce their big Summer Game Fest press conference for June. Because I just don't think, in a world where, Microsoft is gearing up to do a 2-hour presentation, most likely a 2-hour presentation. Fuck, even longer. In a world where Microsoft is gearing up here, let's just say it like this. In a world where Microsoft is gearing up to announce a whole bunch of games and show off a whole bunch of games and then do a separate showcase for Call of Motherfucking Duty, Sony cannot be dropping a 30-minute State of Play broadcast, and then that is it for another month or so, at least in my humble opinion. So if I had to guess, they're probably going to be like, hey, and stay tuned for more at our Summer Game Fest event in 2 weeks' time. Let's move on to some Summer Game Fest discussions. So what I have here is a very handy dandy breakdown of all the Summer Game Fest conference dates and times for those curious. I'm going to read it. I'm going to read out every single one of them in case you are interested. I'm going to read the times from Pacific Standard Time. Sorry to people who live elsewhere. It is too damn bad. Okay. So I watched a lot of these last year. I don't know if I watched all of them. I don't even know if all of them happened last year, if they're new ones from this year. But let's go ahead and do a quick rundown of all of the events that are going to be happening at Summer Game Fest 2024. These are like the press conference, like live stream things. I'm assuming you can watch all of them on YouTube. The Guerrilla Collective is happening Thursday, June 6th at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. The Accessibility Summer Showcase is happening 8 a.m. on Friday. Summer Game Fest kicks things off for real Friday, June 7th at 2 p.m., followed by the Devolver Direct on Friday, 5 p.m. On Saturday, we got a huge amount of events, starting things off 8 a.m. with the Future of Play Direct. That is Saturday, June 8th, 8 a.m., followed by the Wholesome Direct, 9 a.m. On Saturday, June 8th. The Latin America Game Showcase is going to be happening 10 a.m. on Saturday, June 8th. The Women-Led Games Summer Game Fest is happening at 11:30 on June 8th. And then on Saturday, the final showcase is the Future Games Show, which is happening Saturday, June 8th, 12 p.m. We then have the Xbox Game Showcase. That is happening 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time on Sunday, June 9th. Keep in mind that if you keep watching it, the Xbox Game Showcase will eventually turn into the Call of Duty Black Ops 6 Showcase. Then we have the PC Gaming Show that is happening Sunday, June 9th at 1 p.m. And then the Ubisoft Forward, which is the Ubisoft event, is going to be happening Monday, June 10th at 12 p.m. I imagine that in that organization of the collection of showcases that Sony will probably squeeze theirs in somewhere, assuming that they announce one as part of their State of Play today. That's a huge amount of events. I really had a great time going through watching all of them, watching as many as I could. I believe there's also Day of the Dev happening. Yeah, Day of the Dev is happening. I just don't know when. They haven't announced when Day of the Devs is happening. I really enjoy Day of the Devs. Day of the Devs focused on indie content, indie games and whatnot. So keep in mind that this is the current schedule. There will be more updates. I'm sure that if you go to the Summer Game Fest website, that schedule is also there. But I got this from Polygon. They did a rundown of everything happening at Summer Game Fest as of right now. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk the games that I have been playing. Stick around. We will be right back. Welcome back to the podcast. I am GnittWitt. I am your host. I am your god. That's not true. That's not true. I am nobody's god. I'm not important enough to be a god of any kind, right? Like, I don't think I would fit in Norse mythology. I don't think I'd fit in Greek mythology. I know that the Abrahamic religions would probably be pretty pissed off at me if I tried to, kind of sit side by side with their gods. So how about just, I'm a guy. I'm just a dude. I'm just a normal little guy, and I am nobody's god. Oh God, please don't. Oh, I shouldn't say God. I'm just going to stop talking right now. Okay. Let's talk games that I've been playing. I've been playing a whole whack load of games. We're just going to get Ghost of Tsushima out of the way because we have been talking about it for some time now. That game is phenomenal. That game is, last night I started thinking of the best open world games of all time. Another video game list that I'm never going to bother to actually finish thinking of. And really I came up with 3 games for that greatest open world games list of all time. Red Dead Redemption 2. I think no surprise. I would put Ghost of Tsushima right up there. And then Metal Gear Solid 5, The Phantom Pain. That were when I was kind of going back and forth with a friend of mine via text message. Those are the 3 games we could at least agree on were the greatest open world games of all time. You should play Ghost of Tsushima. It's a great game. You should play Red Dead. It's a great game. And hey, if you play Metal Gear Solid 5 The Phantom Pain, just know that there's a lot. There's more than just an open world there. There's a whole lot of other stuff going on in that game, which is fantastic. Anyways, Ghost of Tsushima is incredible. I am making my way through. I'm like maybe 2/3 ish of the way done the main story. I have tried to focus on the main story, just trying to get, because there are a lot of upgrades and abilities that are linked to the story. Like, hey, you did this mission and now you get this thing as part of this cutscene or whatever. So I have been trying to focus more and more on getting through the story, and as such, I am about 2/3 of the way done. Absolutely gorgeous. That game got me thinking. Game's absolutely gorgeous. It got me thinking about cinematography in gaming, and the reason I started thinking about cinematography is because we don't often discuss the shots, the camera work, the framing in games, and I think one of the reasons why we don't often talk about it is because we don't want the camera to get in the way of the action. Whereas, in a movie, the camera kind of is the action, whether it's a still shot or it's, whatever, right? So, close up, landscape, whatever the case may be. In a movie, the camera can sometimes act as a character itself. One of my favorite examples is the way the camera sometimes operates in stuff like The Evil Dead. You really get that sense that, like, hey, something is coming, for Ash and for the characters in that movie, because of the way the camera operates. And it was so fun to watch a lot of that camera work also used in Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, which is a underrated Marvel movie, in my opinion. Just the idea that they let Sam Raimi make like $100 million plus Evil Dead like movie is phenomenal. But in a game, if a game had a camera operate in that way, it might get in the way of your ability to see the action. It might get in your way of controlling the character. Oh, all of a sudden I'm walking into this wall because the fucking camera is not working with me. But there are some examples of games using camera, and I think a really brilliant way. And I'm going to get to Ghost of Tsushima in a moment. One of those examples, I think the camera work in God of War is pretty incredible. And the reason I say that is because if you were to start that game and play through it in a single setting, it would be a long setting, but you could do it, I'm guessing. There are no cuts in that game. It is one long continuous shot, right? Think about something like Children of Men as a film example, or other movies have had long uninterrupted continuous shots but don't last the entire movie. But the camera in God of War, the reboot, I should say, it never cuts. It is one long continuous shot, and I think the game is made better for it. Obviously, you take control of the camera as you are in combat and fighting and traversing, but it never breaks, it never loads in any way, shape, or form. And I think that's a really cool way to frame the journey of Kratos and stuff like that in something like God of War. And say what you will about the controls in something like Resident Evil, but tell me if that camera work didn't do a pretty good job for the graphics at that time to frame the environment, to set up these establishing shots of like, hey, when you open the door. Well, first of all, I will say I think it's kind of neat the camera work in Resident Evil when you kind of it switches to first person to watch you walk up the stairs, open the door in the original games, right? I think that stuff is really neat, right? But then once you open the door, the camera it can be at times facing the character. So you're like, wait, I just walked through the door and now the camera is facing the character. And it isn't until you start to move that you see the environment that you're actually in. Now, if you didn't operate in such a funky, fucked up control, with such fucked up controls, you could probably do a better job of using that camera in a way that doesn't make people sick and nauseous. But the idea that like when you first walk through a door, you don't actually know what you're looking at until you move, even though the character can clearly see, from their perspective. I think is a really fun trick that stuff like Resident Evil does. In the case of Ghost of Tsushima, I think what that game does with its camera is it takes a lot of influence from the framing of classic samurai movies. So often a cutscene looks like they watched a lot of Akira Kurosawa movies and were like, we need it to be framed and shot like this in that very cinematic, letterboxed, sort of way. And I think it makes it really cool. Like, I think those cutscenes look a lot more cinematic because of the camera and the framing and stuff like that. But graphically, I can't help but feel like that camera work is working with the graphics I so incredibly well that like I just feel like I will just turn the camera and I'll be like, oh my god, this is just a gorgeous moment in this game, and I'm just running through a field, or I'm just riding my horse down a beach, or whatever the case may be. Like, I just feel like graphically that game knows it's good looking, and the environment and the design of it is such that like so often when you turn the camera, you're just like, oh, this is super pretty. Something that I feel like Red Dead Redemption also does really well. So I'm not just trying to compare those games just because I think they're both good games. I think they both know what their environment, the mood and the atmosphere that their environment and their setting are trying to convey. And they graphically have the technical chops and artistic chops to pull it off, so that when you turn the camera, when you just, take in that scenery, it often looks very cinematic, very gorgeous as a result. So that was kind of what got me thinking about like just how much I like Ghost of Tsushima. It isn't just that I'm running around cutting dudes, I'm being a samurai ninja, guy, and just, killing people and doing massaging my ADHD brain in terms of, oh, I'm going to run here, do this collectible. I'm going to run here and grab this sword or item or whatever. It's like, the idea is that this is also just a very beautiful game, top to bottom. This is not a restream, for Pro Nevermore in the chat. I don't know if Pro Nevermore is still hanging out. This is not a restream. I'm live. I'm doing my thing. Thanks for hanging out. Talking Ghost of Tsushima. It is just a gorgeous game, top to bottom. I've really enjoyed my time with Ghost of Tsushima, and maybe there's a chance that by the end of next week, for the podcast, I will have finished the main story of Ghost of Tsushima. I don't quite know. We'll see how it goes. Because the more I play through the game, the more I also realize that I also want to get all the trophies. Or at least I want to get the platinum. I don't know if I'll get every trophy, because there are the multiplayer trophies that I haven't even tried the multiplayer yet. I've been playing other multiplayer games as a result. So I have not had a chance to check out the Ghost of Tsushima multiplayer. Thank you, Pro Nevermore, in chat for the follow. But I do want to get all the trophies. One of the things that I really tried to focus on in terms of getting trophies in Ghost of Tsushima was there are trophies specifically related to doing combat a certain way. It's like, what was it? Like there's a way that you can terrify an enemy. Like as you become a better, murder machine, you can kill people in a way that terrifies the other enemy, scares them. And if you scare the enemy enough that they just flee from combat and they run away, there's like a trophy where it's like, oh, you shot an enemy while they were running away. And then I'm like, well, if I take over all the settlements and all the Mongol bases and I do all the story stuff, there might not be a lot of combat encounters left in the open world. So let's try to do that. There was another one where it's like you kick a guy off a ledge, and the ledge is so high that he falls to his death. And I'm like, okay, cool. I need to do this now because I don't know how many ledges I'm going to come across in the game the more I play it. Like, the idea is that like you're clearing out these Mongol encampments. The more you do that, the less and less Mongols there are technically available to fight. So I'm like, well, I should probably take every advantage that I have to get these combat trophies. So I've cleared up the combat specific challenges. Now all the combat specific trophies. Now all the trophies that I have left in Ghost of Tsushima are just play through the game, do every like side quest, find the collectibles, all that stuff, which I would get normally by playing the game. Also, the game has made it really easy to find those collectibles, so I will be grinding through it. But I think my idea is that like I can at least focus on the story so that when I'm done the game in terms of narrative, the only thing I have left is just to clean up the icons, kind of on the map, do those side quests, so on and so forth. But Ghost of Tsushima, a hell of a game, a gorgeous game. And speaking of cinematics, Hellblade 2 is also a gorgeous game. Very much, kind of going for that, interactive cinematic experience, more so than something like a Ghost of Tsushima for sure, because I feel like the thing about Hellblade 2 is that it obscures the control. I'm going to better explain Hellblade in a moment, but just from a cinematic standpoint, there are no like button prompts in Hellblade 2. So there were times when I was playing Hellblade 2 where I was like, is this a cutscene or is this me playing the game? There was a moment very early on in Hellblade 2 where the main character is climbing up these rocks. And I was like, why am I holding the up, direction of the analog stick? Like, this is just a cutscene. I'll just take my hands off the controller. And I took my hands off the controller, and then like 3 or 4 seconds later, after the animation stopped, the characters just stopped moving. And I'm like, oh, okay, I'm supposed to actually play this. And that was kind of a cool moment in Hellblade of like, they're so, focused on that cinematic experience that they've really tried to blur the lines between what is a cutscene and what is interactive. Maybe to Hellblade's detriment, because for Hellblade 2, Senua's Saga Hellblade 2, the sequel to Senua's Sacrifice, I believe that was the name of the game, is the next action adventure game from your friends and mine at Ninja Theory. Out now on Xbox Series X and S and PC and Game Pass, which is where I was playing it. And this is a game that is very much trying to be an action adventure game, heavily influenced and focused on providing that cinematic experience. Again, going back to the idea that like even a seasoned, experienced player of games like myself didn't know that I was in a cutscene, and then I took my hands off the controller, and then my character just stopped moving. Didn't know that I was not in a cutscene, took my hands off the controller, and I was like, oh, I guess I have to keep playing the game. Hellblade 2 is, I hate this word because it's such a loaded word, but it's an interesting game, because on one hand, like, it feels like we're getting closer to that moment we've all wanted of like, it just feels like a playable movie. It just feels like, wow, it's so cinematic. It's just so, gorgeous to look at. The acting, the motion capture, like Andy Serkis couldn't touch this motion capture sort of thing. I'm not picking on Andy Serkis, but like, going for that sort of style. And it's boring. Like, it's so gorgeous. It's so cinematic. It's so just, breathtaking in its design, in terms of just trying to make this cinematic. I keep saying cinematic. Drink every time I say the word cinematic, and then hopefully they pump your stomach in time. But anyways, and it's boring. Like, that's the thing I would say. So Senua Saga Hellblade 2 opens with Senua being captured by these like Nordic slavers. Senua has been going through a lot of trauma since the original game, and she also, Senua, like, physical and mental and emotional trauma in the first game. And even in the first game, Senua suffers from a mental illness where she hears voices in her head. I'm not a medical expert, whatever. I don't know what the name is. Psychosis, I guess. But in Senua Saga Hellblade 2, the main character suffers from psychosis and hears voices in her head. And I wish there was a better way to articulate this, but at the start of the game, they're like, yo, dog, you should play with headphones. You don't fuck around. Put the headphones on, play the game with the headphones on. And the reason that you want to do that is because they have set up the way you hear the voices so that they are doing a couple of things. One, they are panning left and right, but also they are positioned slightly behind you. Like, even with my like stereo headphones on, it still seemed like the voices were coming from the back of my head, but again, panned left and right. No, I think in the game, Senua is hearing multiple voices. From what I've experienced, I maybe put like 2 hours into the game, which my understanding is that it's a pretty short game. So keep that in mind. But while I'm playing through it, they'll say things like, "Oh, they're often whispering and hissing at you and ridiculing you and making you question or trying to make you question what it is that you're seeing, what it is you're experiencing." But they'll say things like the voice will say things like, "Oh, you're not strong enough," or "Oh, you have to grab the sword," or "Oh, they're all dead because of you. Oh, you should have stopped this. You should have been stronger. You're too weak." And they're often these like female voices that you're hearing, or at least sounding like female voices that you're hearing. And I was like, okay, so those are like the part of like the mental illness or whatever, right? And again, it's a neat trick that they do, but I would still say it's just a trick. They're just, go listen to Number 9 by the Beatles, and it's pretty much the same thing as what's happening in Senua Saga. It's just that Senua Saga's voices and audio trickery are just supposed to make you feel sad. But in the case of the game, you're going through it, and then like this big booming voice comes in, and it's like, "Saga or Senua, you ain't shit. You just a punk," or whatever. And I guess like that's your dead dad, like talking to you from beyond the grave, telling you that you suck ass and you ain't shit or something. So like the voices are constantly going in some way, shape, or form throughout the game. And sometimes they are used to trick you into being confused as to where to go and what to do. And sometimes they are literally telling you, pick up the sword, kill that guy, so on and so forth, right? Going back to the psychosis of what's real and what isn't. And when I say pick up the sword, I mean pick up the sword and do combat. The combat in Hellblade 2 is pretty basic. You have I believe it's a light attack, a heavy attack, a block, and a parry. And you are never fighting more, at least from what I've seen, you are never fighting more than one enemy at a time. And again, it's like it's motion captured and it looks really good, but it's just it's just a very basic recognition of patterns of like, oh, he's going to do his heavy attack. I can't block that. I need to parry it. Oh, he's going to do his quick attack. I can block that. If I block it correctly, I can, stab him. Oh, if he does the heavy attack and then I dodge out of the way, he'll be tired for a few seconds. I can open up with an attack, so on and so forth. It's just that. It's like X, X plus Y equals Z, whatever. If they do A, I do B. If they do C, I do D. And that's it. Like, it's very basic. You don't get a gun. You don't get anything else. It's just this basic sword and these basic attacks. And I'm guessing the reason for that is because the game wants to depict combat in a way that is a struggle, wants to depict combat as something that, is a bad thing to experience. There's no stealth from what I can see. Like, the combat is pretty unavoidable from what I can tell, but, they don't want combat to feel like a fun, cool thing the way Ghost of Tsushima is you just murdering Mongols left and right. So there is that. But the story is that, Saga, Senua, her name's not Saga, it's Senua. I keep confusing Senua with Saga Anderson from Alan Wake 2. But anyway, Senua is basically allowing herself to be captured by these slavers to go into enemy territory, to find out what happened, what's happening to her people, and all of that stuff. And along the way, you get a sword, you kill the slavers because the ship kind of crash lands on this island, and then you're trying to figure out what's going on. And again, it's just so linear. Like, it's just so like what you see is what you get with Hellblade 2. There's no like beaten path to go explore. There's nothing really to like see or do outside of this very narrow path that you're frequently walking. And then sometimes you'll walk this narrow path and then you fight a person. And then sometimes you walk the path and you enter like a small environment, like a small open environment, and you're meant to solve these puzzles. And when I say puzzles, I think puzzles is a really generous way to describe the puzzle solving in Hellblade 2. I wish I was making this up. There's a focus button in Hellblade 2 where whatever you're currently looking at with the camera, you kind of zoom in on and look at it. And there have been a couple of puzzles that I've experienced so far where the path to continue walking is blocked by a symbol, and it'll be like you have to go find the symbol in the environment. So, and then like I did this in like a little village that was like, war torn village. Everyone was dead. Bad things happened, all that stuff. Right. And, you would walk into like a house and you'd hear like babies crying and like women screaming and men getting killed. And you're like, oh, I wonder. And then the voices are like, oh, they all died because of you or whatever, even though you just got there and everyone was already dead. And it'd be like, you have to find the tree, you have to find the symbol. And then you just walk to a part in the environment where like this glowing thing, you need to align some glowing half symbol with the other glowing half symbol. And once you've stood in the correct position and you've hit the focus button and you zoom in and look at it, it just clears up. And then it's like, okay, find 2 more of these. And then you do that. And then the door opens and you keep going. And you're like, this isn't really a puzzle. This is me just looking at shit like this. I'm just looking at things to solve puzzles. I'm not, trying to slide this cube into this, putting a square peg in a round hole and all of that stuff. It's just walk around and look at a thing, look at the horrible war torn environment, the bad things that have been happening, maybe fight a guy, maybe, and then look at a thing, open the door. And like, from a technical standpoint, I find it, engaging to look at. Like there's never a part of me that was like, oh, this is ugly. This is, just repulsive. I think there's no technical issues I have with the game. I think creatively, it's just so thin, from a design standpoint that it makes me wonder how much of this game is there. And, from an engagement standpoint, and why the gameplay feels like such an afterthought. Like we've seen plenty of games that go for this cinematic experience. God of War, an example where like you still get to play a game. There's still things that you do. And I know this sounds harsh considering that I've played games like the Telltale adventure games. I've played things like, the Firewatch or Gone Home or some of these walking simulators. But I feel like even in the case of the most, thinly veiled adventure games, the games that have such little actual gameplay to them, the gameplay does not feel like an afterthought. Like in The Walking Dead, when you have to kill a zombie or you have to make a decision, like the Telltale's Walking Dead, it feels like it just is naturally baked into the part of the game experience where it's like, did we really need to fight these guys? I guess you need to have combat in the game because otherwise, people would say, well, what's the point of having a game about experiencing, war and death and destruction if you're not going to stab a guy with a sword? But then the sword play is just so basic. I kind of left my experience with Hellblade 2 scratching my head of like, well, this seems like a very easy game to finish because there's not a lot of game there, but am I actually feeling engaged with anything beyond the narrative? Which I gotta say, like, narratively, I am not relating to this game. I think going into it thinking that the way they depict mental health is like a neat trick, is maybe not what they were quite going for. I think they probably wanted me to relate to it more on an emotional level, but like the voices in my head don't sound like the one that Senua was experiencing. So I don't know if I can quite, get down with that stuff, but like, it's fun to hear the voices panning left and right. And then the big booming voice comes into the center channel and all of that stuff. Like it's fun. It's neat. It definitely depicts mental health in a more interesting way, mental health issues in a more interesting way than something like that fucking Silent Hill game. But it just, I'm just like, there's just not a lot of meat to the bones of a game that is so short. Like if it was like a, 5 to 7 hour, just, jam-packed action game, even trying to go for this style of narrative and vibe, I think I'd be a lot more excited about it. But going into it being like, it's so short and there's not much there anyways, it leaves me kind of scratching my head. That being said, because it's so short and because it's so doable, I do have this, desire to go back and finish it. Like, I feel like I need to know what this game was built. Like if there's some big story reveal, if there's some big emotional moment, some big set piece cinematic thing, I want to see it. I want to see it. And I think part of the reason I want to see it is because it's on Game Pass. It's like, well, I have no reason not to play it. It's free, right? If I paid $70 for this, I would not be very excited about the game that I've been playing. And I think people that are big fans of single player story games are either going to really like this or really hate it. I don't know where the in between is. I guess the in between is me, where it's like there is this morbid curiosity, but would I be like if someone came up to me and was like, "Hey man, I just finished The Last of Us, I just finished God of War, I just finished Starfield, I just finished all these single player story games. Would you recommend Hellblade?" I'd be like, I guess if you have Game Pass, but not for many other reasons. So maybe my tune will change by the time I see the rest of that Hellblade story. Maybe I'll come back and be like, that story is something you absolutely need to see, you absolutely need to experience. But for now, I am kind of left scratching my head as to why Hellblade is so thin of a game for something that is so technical, such a technical marvel. And then I played some multiplayer games. The two multiplayer games that I played were XDefiant and Multiversus. We'll talk Multiversus first. Multiversus is back, y'all. That is the Warner Brothers branded, kind of platform fighter. If you ever played Super Smash Brothers, it's very much like that. The idea is that it's not a fighting game where you are trying to take down the other enemy's health to zero. The idea is as you do damage to the enemies, they become easier and easier to knock off the environment. So you're often fighting on these platforms, these levels that have different, jumps and gaps and things in between. But if you hit your enemy hard enough, you can knock them off the platform, and basically you're trying to knock them out is kind of the idea. And, they had taken that game down for damn near a year, and they have brought it back up. And what we have is a game that feels, at least in my opinion, a lot like the original game. In fact, I can't even quite tell you what is different about Multiversus compared to when it came out versus what we have now. But I can say that I played as Jason. I played as, I guess, I think they gave me a bunch of like currency and stuff for playing the game originally. I guess they said, "Oh, you played this game when it first came out. We're going to give you a bunch of stuff." So it's a free to play game. It is a free to play game, so you can just check it out if you want. You don't have to listen to me. But it's, it's the game where it's Bugs Bunny, Batman, Jason, the Black Adam, and Batman. I already said Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman, and Agent Smith, and the Joker are all fighting together in this kind of cartoonish multiplayer game. Now, I say multiplayer, there is some single player content. The single player is all kind of broken up into these different challenges. You kind of make your way across this challenge board and then fight a boss at the end. There are a couple different challenge boards you can do. One involves the Joker and the other one involves Velma from Scooby-Doo. I played through the Joker one, kind of going back and forth, playing as both Jason and Wonder Woman. Those seem like my two characters. I think I have a third. I think I have Shaggy unlocked, I have Wonder Woman, and I have Jason unlocked. I think those are the games they gave me, characters they gave me. And then there are 3 characters that are currently unlocked on a time trial basis. So I believe, they're going to be unlocked for the next handful of days or whatever, and then they're going to rotate those out. So I did get a chance to play as LeBron James. It's just LeBron. Yeah, it's LeBron James versus Jason Voorhees, the fight we all wanted. But it's LeBron James from the Looney Tunes sequel. And then it's Bugs Bunny, and I think there's one other character that's currently on a time limited thing. Anyways, it's free to play game, so you can earn currency or buy currency to play as those characters if you want. But I think I played a little bit of it when it originally came out, so they gave me some stuff. So now I get to play as Jason. But of course, you're not just buying characters, you're also buying costumes for all the characters. So I believe one of the costumes that you can get is like, it's Bugs Bunny, but he's all green and digitized to look like he's in the Matrix. Again, crossover branding from your friends and mine at Warner Brothers. It also has a battle pass, so as you play through the game, you're earning experience that not only allows you to get more cosmetics and unlocks for the characters that you play as, because the characters all have a separate level, but there's also your big battle pass level. And I was looking at the battle pass being like, I don't know how much of this game I really want to play. And then I saw that if I played enough of the battle pass, I would unlock a costume for Jason that made him look like Jason from Jason X when he's all cyborged out in Jason X. And I was like, I would like to play, if I played this game. I think Jason's a fun character to play as, and I'll get to maybe the way the characters feel and control in a moment. But if I were to continue playing this game, it would be kind of funny if it was Jason from Jason X versus Shaggy dressed as normal Shaggy versus Wonder Woman dressed up like the Green Lantern or whatever in this crazy multiplayer fighting game. The characters all have the same kind of controls. Like everybody, kind of moves and operates with similar, speed and power and things like that, from what I can tell. But what they do have is different attacks and animations. So, Jason has this attack where like he has an uppercut where he kind of pulls out his axe and uppercuts, people kind of into the air. Jason has an attack where if you go like down and special, he puts the enemy in a sleeping bag and then you kind of like beat them on the ground with the sleeping bag or throw them to kind of throw them out of the environment. Wonder Woman, I played as Wonder Woman. She's got the whip, the lasso. So you can kind of lasso people into you and then cut them up with their sword or sword and all that stuff. Shaggy, has an ability where he can like make a sandwich and eat it. And then he gains health back, which is kind of fun. I played, the Joker has like a gun that he shoots and a bunch of other stuff. But, I think Multiversus is an okay time. It just feels a little thin for a game that is gone and come back and is still a free to play game. Like it feels like there's a lot of things that you can spend money on and you can fight, people online or play through what limited, single player stuff there is. But at the end of the day, like you're just playing that game over and over again, completing challenges. Like there was a challenge where it's like, win 10 multiplayer games against a human. And I was like, okay, I'll grind that out, beat that. And then I gained more stuff on the battle pass. Like it's one of those games. You are grinding out challenge after challenge after challenge after limited time events and all that stuff to, earn the right to maybe buy a costume that makes Shaggy look like Uncle Shagsworth. There's a costume for Shaggy called Uncle Shagsworth where he's like in like a smoking jacket and like he just looks all like a fancy Shaggy. And I was like, that's really dumb. If I played as Shaggy, I guess I would want Shaggy to look all fancy, and whatnot. But anyways, I think Multiverse is okay. I just don't know how much I want to play it, though. I think considering there is a decent amount of single player offerings, I could at least play it at my own pace and not worry about, I keep getting killed online by my opponents and all that stuff. Though I could play online if I wanted to. You should maybe check it out if you want. If you were like, I want to, like, my thing was, I think I really came away from Multiversus was like, wow, they've really committed to having all these different Warner Brothers properties mix and match together in really weird ways. Like when I saw that they made a costume for LeBron James that made him look like he was in the Matrix, I was like, that's really dumb. That's a really dumb thing that they did. And that's really funny, that they have that in there, right? The idea that like it's Agent Smith from the Matrix versus, Bugs Bunny versus Shaggy versus Batman. Like that's a fun, silly thing that they've done. I mean, I think that's why so many people like Fortnite, right? Is the idea that you're running around as John Cena shooting Spider-Man Miles Morales, who is shooting Michael Phelps, who is shooting, the Fallout, Pip-Boy or whoever, right? Like it's a lot of that stuff, which is fun. My foot fell asleep. Oh God. Okay. My foot fell asleep. Oh my God. This foot, you just cut this foot off. It is so asleep. Anyways. But that's not the only multiplayer game that I've been playing. I also played XDefiant. And for those wondering, I've been playing XDefiant for a very long time. Not like consistently, but off and on. The reason why I know this is because when they finally put out the full version of XDefiant, formerly known as Tom Clancy's XDefiant, which is the free-to-play military multiplayer shooter from your friends and mine at Ubisoft, I decided to look into my old emails and saw that I had an email from Ubisoft inviting me to play XDefiant back in 2021. So this game has been you think Multiversus has been a long time coming. This game has been in development forever. And what it is it is a multiplayer shooter where you can play as different factions. It's almost like, actually, when you think about it, it's kind of like Multiversus, where Ubisoft has taken a bunch of the kind of character factions from their games, whether that be the ghosts from Tom Clancy's Ghost Recon, or the Echelon spies from Tom Clancy's Splinter Cell, or the members of DedSec from the Watch Dogs games, or the I forget what they're called, but they're the flaming, the flamethrower using enemy faction from The Division, or the Liberation people from Far Cry 5. Like, they've kind of taken a bunch of environments from Ubisoft games and character factions from Ubisoft games and thrown them together into a military shooter that, how would I describe it? It's a lot like Call of Duty. It is a pretty fast-paced shooter. All of the multiplayer matches that I've seen so far have been objective-based. So I played one objective mission where it's, I think it's like 6 versus 6. I think it's teams of 6. And it was like, okay, you're going to start at one side of the battlefield, and you're going to take this like a ball, like this robot. This robot is you're gonna escort this robot to the other side of the battlefield where your enemy is starting at, and then you're gonna protect this robot who's gonna deploy a bomb that's gonna blow up the other side of the map, right? Or there's a game mode where it's like domination, where there are like 3 control points in the battlefield, and you are going to be constantly going back and forth, running between these objectives to recapture them as you shoot the enemy and then capture the base and capture the these sets. It's called domination. It's a very popular Call of Duty mode, but if you never play that, it's basically you have control point A, B, and C. They are in set locations, and you're going to run back and forth between them as you fight the enemy. There's another one where it is one control point, but it moves around the map, and you're supposed to stand in that location, shoot the enemy, and then it'll move. You're going to run to the next, kind of objective location, and so on and so forth. It is a, I would describe it as like a hero shooter in the sense that, like, you have your main weapon. I've been using an assault rifle. You have a secondary weapon. I've been using a pistol. You have a grenade that you can throw. And then the faction that you choose, I've been playing as the spies from the Splinter Cell series. Each faction has 2 different special abilities that you can use. So I think the ghosts have the ability to activate a shield and then activate like a cover that they can stand behind. And you can choose one of the 2 when you enter a level. In the case of the spies, I have the ability to temporarily go invisible, kind of like a predator thing. Or I can instead pick an ability that allows me to see enemies on the map, but it is on a time limit thing. So, like, I can use it for a little bit and then it goes away. Then I need to wait for it to recharge, and then I can use it again. Now, each character also has an ultimate ability. That ultimate ability is something that you can typically only use once per match. So in the case of the third echelon, that's the spies from Splinter Cell that I've been using. Once I get my ultimate ability meter full, I can activate it. And what it does is it gives me a very powerful silenced pistol. And it also allows me to see enemies on the map. So I can kind of just like run around, see them, spot them before they spot me, quickly shoot them, go on, so on and so forth. And of course, just like every multiplayer game, you die, you respawn, you go back out there and you keep fighting, so on and so forth. So we have a handful of maps. I would say about 5 or 6 maps. We have about 4 or 5 different factions to play as. You have a handful of guns. You have shotguns. You have pistols. You have submachine guns. You have sniper rifles. You have assault rifles that I've been primarily using. And as you use those guns, you can level them up, and then, you can put a silencer on that assault rifle. You can change the scope of the assault rifle you're using, so on and so forth, right? It's also a free-to-play game, so there are plenty of cosmetics and all sorts of shit you can buy. You can buy their battle pass. I know I got the battle pass for Multiversus, I think, for free, or everybody got it for free, I don't know. But in the case of XDefiant, I have the free battle pass, so they're always like, hey man, why don't you buy the battle pass and we'll give you like 3 free unlocks or whatever. And I'm like, I don't think I'm going to play much of this game, because for a game that has been in development for this long, there is really not a lot to it. Like, I understand it's a free to play game, so you could spend thousands of hours and never spend a dime, but there's just it's so lacking. Like, the modes don't seem all that interesting. They seem like pretty standard multiplayer shooter modes. The unlocks are not particularly exciting. It just all seems so par for the course, which is shocking considering how long this game is in development. Like, XDefiant is missing its X factor. Like, it is competent. I can shoot dudes. I can do that stuff. I feel like the time to kill is kind of harsh. Like, I feel like it shouldn't take quite as many bullets to take down an enemy, but I'm not going to argue about that stuff. But it just feels like, like Call of Duty is Call of Duty, and every year they're trying to come up with new ways to change the way the progression system of level unlocks and all that stuff works. They're adding new maps, and in fairness, it is a $70 game every year. But, I feel like XDefiant was developed when Call of Duty was a certain way. Call of Duty has now evolved beyond what a lot of the criticisms were of it when XDefiant was currently in development. Like, first of all, like, I don't want to say it, but like, XDefiant just feels like a Call of Duty knockoff, right? XDefiant just totally feels like a Call of Duty knockoff, but it feels like a Call of Duty knockoff from like 4 or 5 years ago, when they probably first started developing this game. And as such, I don't see a world in which this becomes a significant competitor in any sense of the word when it comes to what, multiplayer first person shooters are out there. The other thing I would say is like, oh, well, you shouldn't be so harsh on XDefiant. It's free to play. You know what's also free to play? Fortnite. You know what's also free to play if you want a military-based first-person shooter is Call of Duty Warzone. And I get it, Call of Duty Warzone is a battle royale style game instead of a traditional, like, smaller team versus smaller team multiplayer thing, but it still has a lot more content, and there's a lot more for you to sink your teeth into than something like XDefiant. Like, I hate to say it, like, for a game that has been in development for so long, XDefiant's release feels like an early access. Like, it still feels unfinished. It still feels half-baked. And I just don't think that's a game worth celebrating, considering how long it's been in development and how often they've delayed it. Like, and I feel like that's actually kind of a similar problem with Multiversus. I just at least find the core gameplay and the core, presentation of Multiversus to be a more exciting and interesting game. But in a world where like multiplayer shooters are some of the most popular games out there, like, if you're going to make a new one, you gotta step up your game. You gotta bring some heat, and there's no heat. XDefiant is just a plain boneless, skinless, like, chicken. Like, it's just, there's nothing there, man. There's nothing there to really excite you, unfortunately. So I feel like in the case of XDefiant, I feel more confident walking away from it, knowing that like Ubisoft has just wasted my time. Like, they've just, like I said, I got invited to play the early version of that game in 2021. I was not allowed to talk about it. I've not been allowed to talk about it since the full version of the game came out. And I'm here to tell you that like, it is not, it's not much different than when I originally played it. And I can't believe how little progress has been made in the development of that game. Maybe they've been working under the hood to make sure that the multiplayer matches are smooth in terms of connection and all that stuff. But like, I feel like it took way too long to load into some multiplayer matches. I feel like it took a little too long to find some multiplayer games. And then I play them and I'm like, yeah, this is just shit that I've been playing since like 2020, dog. Like, what are we doing? So I'm probably going to stop playing XDefiant. Like, there is this part of me that's like, oh, it'd be fun if I kept a military shooter, kind of, loaded onto my PC whenever I wanted to play a multiplayer shooter. But like, even if I wanted to play a multiplayer shooter, and if I didn't have one downloaded, or any shooter, not just military, but if I wanted to play a multiplayer shooter of any kind, battle royale or team-based multiplayer or whatever, and I hadn't installed one on my PC and I needed to download something, there are still many other games that I would reach for before I reached for XDefiant, which in a scenario where they've been working on this for so long is probably a worst case scenario for them, because like when Call of Duty Black Ops 6 comes out on Game Pass, I'm going to play that. Like, and I can wait between then and now and play something else. Like I try to consider myself pretty patient when it comes to the games that I'm playing, the games that are coming out. And like, I'm not like, oh, I need to play something just like this before the thing I want to play actually comes out. Like, I'll just play something else. It's fine. But the idea that like anyone is going to give a shit about XDefiant when Call of Duty Black Ops 6 comes out is just laughable, considering how barely developed it currently is. So that's kind of my thing on XDefiant. I think it's pretty lame, all things considered, for a game that I was willing to give the benefit of the doubt of. Unfortunately, I've given it too much of a benefit of a doubt for too long since I played it, so I think I'm going to just wash my hands of XDefiant. But hey, it's also free to play. Don't take it from me. You can play it yourself. But if you were like, GnittWitt, I should play some free to play multiplayer shooters, what suggestions do you have? I would be like, you should play Warzone. You should play Fortnite. If you want to, focus on a team game where you need to communicate with your teammates and your squad, you could play Apex Legends. If that was your thing, you could play PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds. You could play a lot of other things before you. Destiny 2. I think the multiplayer in Destiny 2 is far more interesting than the multiplayer in XDefiant. So that's a shame. But I might keep picking at Multiversus. I kind of want that Jason X skin if I can get it. That is going to do it for the podcast. I have been GnittWitt. You can find everything that I do over at my Linktree, linktree.com/GnittWitt, GnittWitt, Twitch, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky. I gotta keep going with trying out some other games. That Lords of the Fallen reboot just came out on Game Pass, like literally just came out on Game Pass. So I might check out that Lords of the Fallen reboot. Might keep picking at Senua's Saga, Hellblade 2. I played some Haunty. I didn't talk about it this week. I might play some more of it and then check it out. Galacticare. So much is coming out, even on Game Pass, that I need to check out some more of it. But that is going to do it for the podcast. I have been GnittWitt. Thank you so much for watching, hanging out with me. We'll see you all next week. Take it easy.